Imagine constructing a skyscraper without a blueprint. Or imagine baking a complex cake, but you don't have a recipe or any know-how, or maybe you don't even have YouTube. Do you think you're going to be successful? Instructional design is the same. If you are attempting to create a learning experience, it's going to be effective, it's going to be engaging, you're going to need a plan to get you there. You're going to need a system. ADDIE is one of the most commonly used systems in instructional design. So let's talk about what it is and how we can make it work for you. I'm Lindsay, and I cover instructional design, e-learning development, and all things online teaching and learning. So here's ADDIE. You can see that the steps flow in order, and ADDIE is an abbreviation for Analyze, Design, Develop, Implement, and Evaluate. Now, ADDIE can be a little bit deceptive. It does present as what's commonly called a waterfall model, where one step flows into the next. This makes it appear as if this is going to be a very straightforward model to follow. In the real world, it's never going to be quite so straightforward, but ADDIE is a really useful tool for thinking about how you're going to get to the endpoint that you need to be at. It might be move from an analyze into design. You realize you need to do some more analysis, so you back up and you go back forward again. Totally normal and totally okay. And in fact, a lot of other instructional design systems are basically ADDIE, but just repackaged a little bit differently. Let's talk a little bit more about each step. So in analyze, you're going to, of course, figure out what you need to do. You're going to figure out the problem. You're going to clarify those goals and objectives that are going to help solve that problem. You're going to think about who your learners are, what they need, how they learn best. You're also going to think about the overall project issues. What are the constraints? What's the timeline? What's the budget? Good instructional design is really just doing the best you can with the time, the resources, the skills you have at hand. You can only do the best you can with what you have. So that's something that needs to come into play in Analyze. You might have some great idea for some really big, amazing project, but if you don't have the time and you don't have the budget, I'm sorry, it's just not going to happen. Design phase. This is before you're actually building out the thing. So if you're using Storyline or Rise, you're not using it yet. You're still thinking and you're still planning. You're writing learning objectives. You're planning your assessments that align with those objectives. You're thinking about how you're going to teach. What are your instructional strategies in whatever platform you're going to use? If it's a live training, how are you going to teach? If it is an e-learning tutorial, how are you going to present that content and make it interactive? You're going to figure out what you need, what the materials that you need, and you're going to design the entire experience from start to finish. This is all on paper, as it were. Maybe you're sketching it out literally on paper. Maybe you're making an outline. I actually use Microsoft Word constantly for making outlines, for making plans. I might use a PowerPoint to storyboard something. It really depends on how you work best, how you get that design done. But if you do a complete job at this stage, in the design stage of ADDIE, you're going to save yourself a ton of time later on when you're building out materials or you're building out an e-learning tutorial. Because if you don't know where you're going, you're going to end up making a lot of detours along the way that you didn't intend. You're going to end up wasting a lot of time. This brings us to develop. This is where you're actually putting it all together. You're taking all your design work and you're making it come to life. You're building out everything. You're producing those materials. You're getting feedback maybe along the way from your stakeholders and figuring out how to make them really happy. And you're also going to be sure to conduct quality assurance testing. That's really worth reiterating because the next stage is going to be implement. And as you develop these things, you need to make sure you're getting feedback, you're doing quality assurance so that when you implement it, it's ready for prime time. It's ready for everyone to actually dive in and start using. Implementing is where, if it's a live training, you're going to make sure the people that are facilitating are trained in it. You might be preparing learners, you might be arranging the classroom, you might be setting up the course on your learning management system. This is where the learning actually happens and any logistical issues are addressed. Okay? Learners are learning. This is good. Finally, your job is not done. It's great that learners are learning, but let's find out how much they learned, how they felt about it, maybe what it actually means for your institution. So there's two kinds of evaluation. Formative is ongoing. That's happening during the development of your learning experience. Formative evaluation can also happen within your learning experience itself, where you're checking learning and maybe making adjustments along the way. Summative evaluation is you are figuring out if the learning kind of came together and was successful as a whole. Did learners learn? Are people happy? Is everything working as it should? You can collect feedback from both the learners and the people that are facilitating. If it's an asynchronous e-learning tutorial, maybe you're the one that's the judge of this. You want to gauge if those objectives and those outcomes you set were being met. And in this phase, you may start thinking about revising things for future implementation. It might be that you just need to make a list now and you'll revise maybe next year or the next iteration of this tutorial or course, or maybe you can make some small changes now. Overall, ADDIE does have quite the emphasis on analysis and design. A lot of time goes into those two steps. Maybe that's how you work best. Maybe it's not. And this also depends on your context. How did they work best? How did they want you to work? There's a lot of tension between those two things, and you just have to do the best you can. ADDIE can be really time intensive, and again, does have kind of that overemphasis on the waterfall model when you look at it. Real life is not so neat and tidy, but again, ADDIE is a really nice system for thinking about how you're going to achieve your learning experience and making sure you don't miss any steps along the way. Does have a little bit of an emphasis on doing it right the first time, but again, the more you do instructional design, the easier it gets, the more you know what to expect, and the more you can hone your process along the way.